Welcome to the podcast, Entrepreneur Perspectives, building and protecting your business one podcast at a time, a CADSource family production. In this episode, we discuss SportsEpreneur, business relationships, and the Seattle Seahawks. Our guest today is Gino Trapani. Gino is the founder of Trapani Associates. He is an executive search and recruiting professional, helping companies find great talent and improving talent acquisition strategy, process, and execution. He currently lives in Seattle, Washington with his wife, kids, and dog. Gino's experience is unique in that he has executed the search and recruitment discipline within three key areas: agency, corporate, and professional services. He has worked for companies and served clients ranging from startups and boutiques to mid-market and Fortune 100 enterprises across a number of industries. With Gino's compelling stories from the business world to his love of sports, you can imagine our excitement to have Gino on this podcast. Let's bring him in, Gino Trapani. Gino, welcome to the Entrepreneur Perspectives podcast. It's great to have you today.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. It's good to be here.
Yeah, so we first met through Twitter. You had made a post on LinkedIn using a sports and business analogy. And immediately I saw it somehow. I don't know if we were connected right away. Somehow you showed up in my feed and I pointed it out to John, who does a lot of work here, business development and social media on Twitter. He saw it. He loved it too. Next thing you know, you guys are having a conversation on the phone about what you're into, what your business is all about, why you're talking about sports and business analogies. And one thing led to another, and here you are on the podcast. So obviously you have a love of sports, you have a love of business, and you have a love of kind of tying the two together. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, no problem. It's funny because I am a very passive user of Twitter. I think I put maybe 100 or so posts out there in the 9 years that I've been on it, and so I just threw that out there, and I, kudos for you guys for picking it up. I really appreciate it. But it's just something that, sports is just a love of mine. I mean, I grew up playing sports, Little League baseball, football through high school, intramurals through college, old man softball after that.
Yeah.
So, I've always been a sports guy. And so, I just think there's a ton of tie-ins between, just between how you look at sports or how you engage in sports and the teamwork and the camaraderie and then really what it's all about at its core. When you're talking about people and team, and the same thing applies to business, I think. I mean, there's so many crossovers, so it's just kind of a natural thing. I think they both cross over like that.
They absolutely do, and it's funny because we connected on LinkedIn after that, and before we were going to start recording this podcast, I just wanted to look at your profile one more time, and I saw a post that you made. It's World Cup going on as we're recording this, and there's an incredible soccer game recently in Japan. Ended up losing to Belgium in the game where just Japan's winning 2-0. Next thing you know, it's 2-2, and then they lose basically at the last second. Like if you like the equivalent of basketball, it's like someone hitting a jumper with like 1 second to go, and they lose this heartbreaking game. And this isn't just a game; this is countries involved. It's just so much that goes into it. And you shared a post on LinkedIn about that defeat of Japan, but it wasn't about the loss that they had. It was bigger than that. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it was, and I'll be honest, I didn't watch the game, so I didn't follow it. But when I caught when I just caught the news feed and a story about what the Japanese team and their fans did, there's a picture of a totally spotless and clean locker room. And if anybody's played sports and you've been in a locker room environment, those things get trashed. They're dirty, and typically team comes in, does their thing, they leave, and it's the staff of whatever stadium you're playing in is probably the ones that are ended up cleaning it up. And even after a heartbreaking loss like that, I mean, your head is not anywhere near anything but just being down about whatever happened. Or trying to look forward to what's going on next. But you're definitely not in a place of thinking about, okay, I need to clean up after myself. But the team and the staff, they cleaned the locker room spotless. And like you said, I mean, an agonizing defeat, probably, a super low point, at least in that moment for everybody there. But they cleaned the locker room spotless. Not only that, but then they wrote a note in Russian to the host country saying thank you. So they put whatever their feelings were aside for themselves, and they took the path of gratitude for being in the position and the spotlight that they're in, and and a country that hosted them there. And they just took that position of gratitude. And not only that, but their fans too. There were pictures of their fans walking around with trash bags in the stadium, cleaning up their sections. And, I'm sure, Eric, you've probably been to a million football games, baseball games, basketball games, just like me. And, I'm kind of a clean guy. So I clean up after myself for the most part, but I'm not going to lie. I've left a pop can or a couple nachos, underneath the seat.
Yeah.
But they were going around. I mean, and you've probably been to games where you've been heartbroken when your team lost, and that's the last thing on your mind. So it's just, I just looked at that and I was like, man, that's what it's all about. It's a big time. It's a big time game. It's a big time moment. The world's watching, and you're not sulking. You're not trashing your streets. You're not, getting mad. You're cleaning up after yourself, and you're respecting the host of where you're at. And that's just a big bout of their culture, and I think how they approach things. And I'm not an expert on culture, but that's just my take on it. But I just thought that just showed, on the biggest stage in the world, that just showed just the amount of class that they have.
Yeah, and there's so many lessons you can take from it. I mean, there's just a few that come to mind. Like, you go to an office, right, and you work in your office. No one's above doing anything in the office. We have coffee, right? And then like the coffee grinds get everywhere, and someone can clean it up, or someone spilled water. Your office and your desk is a mess. Like, kind of cleaning up after yourself. But more than that, like, there's CEOs, there's high profile people that they'll take out the garbage. They'll do the dishes. Jeff Bezos always said, one thing that keeps him grounded is doing the dishes. He still does the dishes every day. One of the richest people in the world. There's something that I do. I have a dog, and he goes out in the backyard and he does his business. And one way I keep myself grounded, and it's not a great job, and I do not look forward to it, but I make the most of it, that I'll go out and pick up his so-called business, right? And it absolutely keeps you grounded. That's one lesson. The other one you said is respect. I mean, just having respect for where you are, what other people did for you, and doing it even in the best of times and the worst of times. And that is the ultimate, I think, sign of respect. And just the last one is just kind of what we've been talking about, is the fact that you can apply it to other things. So you can watch a soccer game, you can watch any sporting event. And one of the things we always say is sports matter because they don't matter. But they also matter because you can take so many other lessons from it, and what you went out and pointed out on LinkedIn is an amazing thing. And I think that's really cool, because a lot of people say to us, well, yeah, I want to get on LinkedIn, I want to get on Twitter, but I don't know what to talk about, I don't know what to share. Well, you don't have to share your own story. You can just tell what you saw that someone else did, that Team Japan did in the 2018 World Cup. So I think there's so many things that relay, that just tie in together between sports and business. And that's, of course, the reason why we wanted to talk to you. But there's a lot of reasons we wanted to talk to you. Another thing that stood out that you were doing is you say the heart of your business is building relationships. Elaborate a little bit more on that.
Yeah. So my business is at its core, it's recruiting. I've been doing it for about 14 years, and about 5 years on my own. So I run my own independent recruiting and search practice, and the basis of it is definitely relationships. Day in and day out, I work with people, and when you're talking about what I do at its core, when you're talking about solving problems for a business in terms of, okay, either A, we have this growing company and we need to market and get the best talent that we can to help our business evolve, or we have an open spot we need to fill, et cetera. It's all about understanding the business, but also understanding the culture and the people. And the only way to do that is to build a relationship with them, to really get at the root of who they are, what they're all about, and what's important. And on the flip side, for my business in particular, too, relationships with anybody that is either searching for a job, or in my case, I take a more proactive headhunting approach, or maybe it's just so I can just expand and make an introduction to start and establish a relationship for maybe something that'll happen 6, 9, 12 months, 2, 3 years down the road. I think my business is all relationship built. It's not transactional. It takes time, and the only way to really build strong relationships, to build pure relationships, is over time. And so I just think, and it's not just my business in general. Generally speaking, anything you do is all about developing those core relationships and using that in any form of business.
Yeah, it's an important topic that you hit on because, so many times you want to meet with someone and you want to close the deal, right? You want to, have them become, you become the recruiting firm for them, or the company hires you, right? Whatever piece of that puzzle you're trying to fix, you want to close that deal, right? You got to get on, you got to build cash flow and keep your business moving forward. But it's understanding that there's a long game in here. And the best way to build that long game is through relationships. So people are actually going to, first of all, they have to, the know, like, and trust. They have to know who you are. They have to like you, and they have to then trust you that you're going to help them out with one of the most important decisions that someone can make as an individual, or a company can make when hiring somebody else. And building that relationship is got to be it. Now, people say those things, right? And I'm sure you're not the only business owner, you're not the only recruiting firm that talks about we have to build relationships. And so it's probably difficult, but I think is that, and I believe, and we've done this as well, is over time, and you prove it out over and over and over again, right? It's like playing, as we go to the sports analogies, right? It's well, you won a game. Congratulations. Did you win the next game and the next game? And did you come through? And did Japan just do what they did once? Probably not. This is like you said, in their culture. This is part of what they do. This is part of your culture and what you're doing at your business, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's go back to the analogies, play all four quarters. In football, right? It's not a short game for sure. And they say, people buy from people that they like, right? But how do they get to like you? Well, you got to get to a human level with somebody, and it's not, when you're talking about building relationships in business, at least for me, and you can see it in the post that I put out there, it had nothing to do with my business. It had absolutely zero to do with me trying to pump my brand or anything like that. It was just, I saw a really good story that I thought it would be really cool to share because it had a really important message to it. And so, use that as an example, and you just connecting with people at a human level. And over time, it's you get to know them as people, not just as in business. And sure, then they get to like you, and they're going to want to buy from you more, and you have to execute, of course. But it's really just getting to the foundation of just being human and getting to know people at a deeper level than just hey, what do you do? And and during your work time, it's much deeper than that. And I think it's even bigger today in the way that business is being done, especially with social media and how everything's going. We are way more in tune with each other's personal lives than we ever have been. So so I think if you're into that and you're able to get to know people at that level, it just makes everything in the long term, I think, much easier and a lot more fun too, because then you're getting to know people at a much deeper level.
That's right, and it's giving, right? So you're giving these ideas, you're giving these thoughts, and people can take and do with it what they want, right? They don't have to come and say, "Well, I want to buy something from you now." You could just right. You gave it to them, and then they can do with it what they want. But there is a hustle, right? There is the nonstop. You have to find the right people, the right companies. You got to match everybody up. If you're looking for the perfect candidate, you talk about finding the perfect candidate. How do you do that? What is that like? What is that process like?
Well, it kind of goes back to building that relationship, right? And every situation is unique, and so I work with with a broad client base, companies in different industries, different cultures, different sizes, different stages of their evolutions. So every situation is unique, and every candidate or every person is unique in their own right too. And so so when I'm talking about a perfect candidate, it's really situational for a particular search or a particular company and situation. But I think at its core, first, from an evaluation standpoint, there's a technical skill set for whatever job or whatever industry somebody is in that I have to take on and understand and make sure that I'm learning and understanding. But I think it's just more on, there's a IQ, EQ conversation that people have, smarts, and emotional intelligence versus, IQ, and I don't even know how you describe that, brain intelligence. And I go to EQ all the time. I mean, I think if somebody is able to hold a normal conversation, and be engaging and not just answer questions, but also ask questions back and elaborate on their answers. And I just really look for people who are genuine in their approach and how they articulate themselves, how they articulate their value, and really just, again, getting back to the relationship, getting to know them as a human, getting to know them as a person, and the rest of the stuff, shakes itself out as we talk. But that's really what we're, if I'm going to kind of summarize everything into a whole, that's where I start. And then from there, if they're good people, then things work themselves out after that.
Yeah, they balance each other, right? The IQ and the EQ, because we've seen it on both sides. So we'll find the person that had the skill set, but they did not have the EQ, the emotional intelligence, to carry on that conversation to whether, let's say they're in a front facing, they're talking to clients, they couldn't carry on the conversation with that client. The client would see right through it. Or the reverse of it, they had the EQ but didn't have the IQ, so they couldn't execute on any of the things. They didn't have the technical skills to deal with it. And it's difficult to figure all that out in maybe, let's say, a few emails, a phone call, a resume, social media profiles, and conversations, and meeting with someone and going out to lunch with them, right? But you try your best to figure all those things out, and then a firm like you can absolutely take that to the next level. Because if I'm doing all the things that I'm doing, but if I have a firm to kind of help me along the way in figuring out, well, this is the candidate, this is the perfect candidate, then that's going to help me out much better. But kind of diving in more to the business side of things, hiring is difficult, right? And you're talking about, we're all over the place with industries, and let's maybe hone in a little bit maybe on smaller companies. I don't know what you consider necessarily a smaller company, but small businesses can be anything probably under 50 people. It's defined many different ways. But if you're looking at a small business and they're looking to hire, and understanding, like, you see it from their mindset, because you're a business owner now too, that this is not the easiest thing to do. This is very difficult, and you're making a decision that could impact you in so many different ways, for good and for bad. And if it doesn't work out, then what do you do? How do you handle those types of conversations? How do you get people to think of, you should hire, you should scale the business, and all that goes with it?
Well, I think it's every situation is unique, and there are a lot of different factors that are going to go into it. Cash flow being one. What is the scale of business? What is their business? Is it a business that you can look to automation, which is a huge topic right now in pretty much everything, and especially in my industry. But what can be automated? What shouldn't be automated? And so I think when I'm talking with smaller companies like that, and I think I've worked with small mom and pop shops. I would call, I would consider myself a mom and pop shop because it's just me. But smaller companies that are in a crossroads, maybe, to where they either need to, whether it's hiring or whether it's doing something else to get them to where they want to go. I can advise them on stuff that's related to the talent market and what would help them in a certain area. But I think companies need to make that decision for themselves, obviously, when they get to that point on what they need and how they need to get it. I think on that point, like, I'll give an example. Strategy has a big thing. I've seen companies hire me that brought in a brand new leader, let's say in the sales organization, and they just got a huge round of funding. So now they have a bunch of cash and they want to expand, and they kind of revamp how they're going to go through their sales process and how they're going to align their resources internally. And so now that by that plan, it says, okay, now we need to hire in this market, that market, pick 5 or 10 markets. Okay. They don't have the infrastructure internally to do that. They bring me in and I execute, and I help them find great talent that they bring on board. Great people, the right fits, great process, but 6 months down the road, most of them are gone. A year down the road, they're almost all gone because it was a flawed strategy and it didn't work out. The company's still successful, but it had to do a reboot. It had to settle down before it could then move forward. So maybe taking some pause before you accelerate, and making those are costly decisions, hugely costly decisions. Not only just what they paid for that, but just the people that they hired on that came in with a vision and with an excitement about what they were doing, and then realizing the strategy just didn't work out and it was short lived. So I think just companies just need to make sure that they're being smart on how they're going to market and what they're doing, so they don't make those kind of costly decisions only for monetary reasons. But you're talking about, like you hit on earlier, important decisions, people's lives when they're talking about careers. So
Yeah. Well, you're telling them maybe to go back to the drawing board, and I like how you kind of brought up 2 points. One is disruption, and two is, or not disruption, automation, and which is a disruption to your business, but also not hiring. So if you say like, well, I think you should automate that, or I think you shouldn't hire right now and you should work on your strategy, you're basically saying don't buy from me. But I think that's exactly what you need to be saying. You're not shying away. And so many industries are being disrupted right now. And, there's so many ways to get a job, and you can go online and get a job, or you can, I have a good friend of mine who's building out a robot business where you rent robots, and they do the coding of the robot, and the robot is the new employee, right? Robot 1, Robot A, whatever they call it. That's the new employee that they're bringing on board. So someone in your line of work might think, well, I'm going to shy away from that, and I disagree with everything. Well, no, maybe it's the right thing, and here you're kind of understanding that and realizing it, and also then saying, well, if you're looking to hire someone, maybe now is not the time because your strategy is not in place. That's the person, that's the company that's going to come back to you when they got their next round of funding, and they really want to ramp up, and they want to go hire 20 salespeople or 20 people for whatever process they're creating. You're the trusted advisor, which we were talking about before. They know you now. Clearly they like you because they're asking your questions and they're taking your advice. Now they trust you more than anybody else. So that didn't happen overnight. That might not be for 2, 3, 5 years later. They finally came back and said, hey, Gino, I think we're ready to take that next move with our company. So you're clearly doing it the right way because you're seeing what is going on in your industry, and you're not shying away from it.
Yeah, I mean, you hit on it earlier too. Everything's a long game. There is no short game in this. I mean, people might hit a lottery ticket here and there, but those are the exceptions to the rule. And I'm just the way I approach things. I'm way more concerned with making sure that the situation is right for if I'm going to engage with a client. I ask all the why questions. Why are you hiring? What are you trying to accomplish? And I don't even really talk about like a particular job. It's more about what's the business doing and where's it going and why is it going there, to really just get to the root of everything. So yeah, I mean, that's just my approach, man. I mean, to me, it's second nature. That's just the way I look at life and the way I look at business. It's, always, don't just act just to act. I'm and maybe to a fault too. I think a little bit too much about stuff like that. But I also just feel like it for myself and for anybody I work with, it's better to flush things out early on and go through a discovery phase. And I'm not going to tell a business how to run or what to do, but I might see something that they don't. I think that third party outside perspective in anything that you do is good to have, because people can get tunnel vision. You get excited about an idea and you think something's going to be great, but hold on a second, did you see that left turn over here? Well, no, I was totally focused on the right. And now you have a different way of looking at it. Right. So yeah, it's like advisory, I just think it's so important to have those conversations and just to be at that level with people before, in any form of life, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's why pilots have navigators, right? I mean, you're focused on your altitude, but you didn't see the gasket, so you got to think about all these different things. So I think it's important what you're doing. It's deep what you're saying, but it's incredibly simple. We like all that stuff. So I appreciate you sharing your thoughts on sports and business analogies and building relationships and finding the perfect candidate, and just the simple way you approach it, but also the deep way you approach it. What I want to do now, though, is go into a more rapid fire approach, hit you with some questions, and then get you on out of here. Does that sound good?
Yep, go for it.
All right, let's do it. So if I were to take you out of running your search and recruiting firm, what career would you be in?
Landscape architecture.
There you go. Do you do that at your house right now?
At a very DIY basic level. I mean, it's just, I just got into, and I don't watch hardly any TV at all, but last night I got into this show. It's called Insane Pools. I think it's on Animal Planet or something, but it's about this guy, Lucas, who he just builds these ridiculous like grotto pools in people's backyards. I mean like hotel resort style pools, and they just landscape these yards, and it's just that stuff to me is just so fascinating. But yeah, I mean, I just love nature. I love being out in my yard. I love working. So I think if I wasn't doing this, I'd be doing something that involved, something to do with landscape architecture.
Yeah,
something that's fascinating to me.
That's very cool. Well, that's what it sounds like, right? You have these things that you're fascinated by, whether it's sports and business or landscape architecture. I think that's the tie-in where it all kind of makes sense as to what people's interests are, whether they're working or not working. So you're in Seattle, Washington. You live in an incredible city, one of the cities that's probably talked about the most in this country as like the place you got to go, and I got to go there, right? I've talked about it for long enough, and I'm on the other side of the coast. But anyway, Seattle's an incredible place, and maybe you're in your favorite city to travel to. But if you were to pick a city that you have traveled to or would like to travel to, what city would that be?
There's a lot there.
Yeah.
I think that to me, that question is best answered probably by what stage of life are you asking me that question?
Yeah,
right now. If you would ask me this question 15, 20 years ago,
yeah.
or 15, 20 years ago, I would have said Vegas. In my younger days, Vegas. If you were to ask me now, so I love tropical places. I love beaches. I'm not a big city guy. I love more just relaxed beach style. So, I mean, I'll run down a few. I've been to Maui. I love going on vacation in Maui, go to the beach, hang out. It's chill. I love it. Interesting places that I've been that are really cool to see, like Santorini, Greece. If you've ever been there or seen it, it's just this really cool, super unique, it's not a city. I mean, it's a city, but not really, but it's on top of the island and it just overlooks everything and it's all white. It's just this really just awesome place. Florence, Italy was a place that I've been to a couple times that I just love the history, love the architecture. It's just the countryside is right there. It's just a really cool spot. Those would probably be it.
There's some good places. Florence is amazing. So you got some other good ones there on the West Coast. You go to Hawaii from the East Coast. It's not as easy to get to. A little bit long of a ride, but
right.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. So when you're traveling these places, I'm sure you're reading a lot. Obviously, we know that you write some as well. If you were to recommend one book to entrepreneurs that you've read that's kind of left an impression on you, what book would that be?
I'm going to let you down on this one, man. I don't read books. I mean, okay. I hardly ever read books. I read content. I read a lot of short read, mid read content. So don't take that as I don't read because I'm a very good reader. But
yep.
I just honestly, man, and it's funny because I always hear people talk about and you always read these things, so, what's the most important book you've ever read? What's the most influential book? And I sit there, I'm like, am I missing out? Because every time I've ever sat down to read something, I just get lost. And maybe it's not the patience thing, but I read content all the time. Yeah. So, I'm always, I'll give you one right now that I'm into. I'm into Gary Vaynerchuk. Yeah. I like his message. I like what he's doing right now. I resonate with his style. He's just, he's pure, but what I like about what he's saying is he's given some pretty, honestly, basic stuff. It's real basic, but people need a reminder of it. But I like that he's not trying to force feed how he does things. He's telling you how he does things, but he's always got the caveat of do you. Whatever makes you happy, that's it. That's what wins. And I totally 1,000% subscribe to that thought process. So, kind of what his message now and how he's going about things, I'm pretty much into that. Outside of that, man, Harry Potter.
Yeah.
The only reason I say that is because my 7-year-old son just finished book number 4, which is like 830 pages or 750 pages.
Yeah.
My son reads more than that. I told him after he was done reading that, I'm like, man, you've read more in one book than I have in my life in books. So, I just love it. But I've made it a conscious effort since he was born to read to him every single night. And so maybe that kind of translated to his love of reading now. But it's funny, I've read more to him than I ever have for myself.
Yeah, but I love your answer. I love your honesty around it, and I agree with you. It's funny. I did not read a lot for a long time. Before I started building this business is when I kind of took it to the next level. And now I read a ton or listen to Audible and do a lot of that. But I read a lot of content as well. And it was interesting. I was looking for a book around branding architecture and just really kind of diving deep into that topic. And I just couldn't find a book. And I'm like, you know what? I don't need to find a book. There's articles, there's professionals, there's people that have not written the book about it because they didn't want to write a book. But they've created blog posts or articles or there's news feeds out there that talk about branded architecture, right? So I don't have to read the book on it. And I think sometimes we get lost into saying, well, I have to find the book on that topic, or I want to read a book. No, you don't, because there's tons of reading you can do. It doesn't have to be in a book. And you mentioned Gary Vaynerchuk. There's one person who talks about not reading a book, but there's a way to consume information or content. I mean, he always talks about just watching other people. You talk about EQ all the time, and just kind of taking things in and seeing not what you read, but what are the actions of other people, and what can you take from that, and what can you learn from that? I mean, you might be better off. Some people are better listening to someone talk or watching a YouTube video, and I don't think there's a right or wrong answer for it. I mean, it's just something that we like to ask, and honestly, I like your type of answer, a lot, because it's different, it's unique, it's a different approach, and it doesn't mean you're not reading and you're not learning. Clearly you are, and you're sharing that knowledge as well. So no, I'm right there with you as to where you're coming from and subscribing to a certain theory and living by that. I think that's important. But at the same time, here you are with your 7-year-old, and you're developing a love of reading and letting them make the decision for them when they get older as to the way they want to learn and they want to acquire information. So I think it's pretty awesome. Social media. Yeah, go for it. You have something else you want to add?
I was just going to piggyback on that, and just, from reading content. I think if there was a book by someone that I wanted to get into and read, then reading it, I think that's good too. But for me, I can get so many different perspectives because of what you said. It's out there. I mean, social media and there's content for any topic, but you can get, if you're looking for, let's use automation, for example. Okay, you can read one person who wrote one book about it, or you can read 10 different people's perspectives on the same topic and then formulate and get different viewpoints, different opinions, and then you can kind of, from that, obviously you formulate your own opinions and whatnot, but you're just getting a different take on the same topic in a shorter amount of time, that way.
Yeah, well, that's what this is, entrepreneur perspectives. I don't want the same perspectives from everybody. If everyone came on here and recommended, I talked to someone recently, Shoe Dog, the Phil Knight book about Nike. I love that book. It's one of my favorites. It's amazing. But if every single person came on here and said that book every single time, this would be boring. Like, the perspectives are the same. We're just obviously gathering people from the same audience. We want something different. I want that unique approach. And I think you're right. I think it is important to have that critical thinking and not just taking everything as someone says as gospel. It's, what are your own thoughts on that topic? And maybe you can get different perspectives and then apply it to what your thought is. Your thought can be different as well. So you talked about social media. Social media is huge and personalized for a lot of people, but we're talking about business here. We've talked about how we met on Twitter, and then we kind of took it the next step and did LinkedIn, and now we're here on a podcast. But if you were to identify your favorite social media app today, what would that be?
It'd be LinkedIn. For me, especially for my business. I mean, that's where everything happens, for the most part in my business, from a social media standpoint. So, for me, that's number one. I know Twitter can be effective. I just haven't gotten into it yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, it's definitely LinkedIn.
LinkedIn's got a lot of attention right now. There's no doubt. So you're on this podcast. I'm assuming you maybe listen to some other podcasts from time to time. Do you have a favorite podcast platform that you listen to, like Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, one of the other ones?
Well, it's the first time I've done a podcast.
Oh, cool.
So you got a rookie here.
That's it. I love it. Well, you do listen to Gary V's podcast?
Yeah. So as far as what I listen to, I mean, that's honestly, that you hit it right there. I mean, I literally just got a podcast app on my phone 2 weeks ago. Okay. And literally that's probably the only one that I listen to, or that I have listened to. I've had a buddy that did some stuff way back when, but never listened to anything religiously. So I'm kind of new to that game.
All right, cool. Well, we want this one. But, Entrepreneur Perspectives can be the second one that you listen to. How about that?
I love it.
Yeah,
I have listened to some of your other stuff too, and
cool.
Yeah, I like you guys' style. Yeah,
very good. I appreciate that. Are you listening now? The excuse me, the app that you listen to or that you use to listen to it. What app did you just download 2 weeks ago?
Let me take a look.
Look it up. There we go.
I have to look it up.
That's great.
Where'd it go? It just says podcasts on my iPhone.
Okay. Is it the iPhone? Probably that's what it is. That's what you have. So you have the Apple Podcast, and that's the typical one that most people use. But it's always interesting because there's all these new platforms coming out for podcast listening. Google Play, but they're changing around. Stitcher, Anchor's a new one that's out there. And you just type in podcast to the App Store, and it's just probably endless how many podcast listening platforms exist nowadays. So that's what's going on. So that's what it takes, though. If someone starts listening to a podcast, they listen to one, they hear about it, they start listening to another one, and next thing you know, you'll have like all these different podcasts to listen to, and it becomes so much noise. But anyway, now let's get into the good stuff. You talked about it before. You're a huge sports fan. Obviously, we're both sports fans. We talk about sports and business. Now I'm going to do something to you real fast. For the rest of your life, you can only root for one sports team. Which team would that be?
Seattle Seahawks.
There it is. Number 12,
no answer from me.
The 12th fan. There it is. So the Seahawks have had. So what do you like? The Seahawks are always been a fun team to root for. The Kingdom, and then they get their new stadium. I always love watching games. I would love to go there, but I've always enjoyed watching the games on TV there because the stadium just looks absolutely amazing. The fans are amazing. The team's been a lot of fun to watch. They didn't have as much success as last year, but for the years before that, they were, if not the best organization in professional football, they were one of them. Had an incredible Super Bowl win, and on the flip side, had a terrible loss. So, where are you with the state of the Seahawks right now?
I'm always optimistic. I'm realistic, optimistic. So, a little bit of context. I moved here to Seattle, or the Seattle area, in 1980. So I've been here for 38 years now. And so at the ripe young age of 6. And so I adopted them obviously right away. And I've been there through 80% of the really bad, hard times. But then the 20% that's been pretty fun and pretty good. Where they're at today, I think they're going to be better than what people think. I think if you ask anybody around here who really, really follows them, and you kind of look at, people see the stars, right? People see Richard Sherman, people see Michael Bennett, people see Cliff Averill that are no longer with the team. People see Earl Thomas holding out. You see all these things, and that's, those things affect the team. I think actually most of that is actually a positive. The guys that aren't here. Not Cliff Averill. His was unfortunate with his neck, and same thing with Cam. But if you look at the young guys, if you look at the core, if you look at how this team is run, and the main mantra of competition, always competing, and I think there's a Sherman article talking about how it's hard to resonate that with the old guys that have been there for a while. Well, that means that it's time for you to move on. You've gotten too big for the team. And so what got you guys here was that. What got you guys here was, I think it was Marcus Trufant getting hurt, and Richard Sherman was this unknown 5th-round draft pick getting inserted into the lineup because of an injury to one of our superstar players. Know where you came from and how you got there because of that competition mantra, and that's exactly what this culture is all about within the Seahawks. So I think it's going to be a good season. It's a transitional period, of course. You got pretty much an entirely new coaching staff, D coordinator, O coordinator, position coaches that have all turned over, and I think for the good. Just like in anything, you have a good run, but things can go stale pretty quick. And as you know, in the NFL, not so long. Things change quickly. It's hard to have maintained success. Really, the Patriots are the standard in that respect. They've been doing it forever, and so. But the Hawks have had a good run, and so they're getting back to, I think, where they've been. They have a good youth core, and I think they'll be good this year. But it's just like everything, man. It's you're one injury away from a good season or a bad season. So we'll see. But I'm always the optimist.
Yeah, well, it's an incredible take on the Seahawks, and we could talk sports all day and hop into that and create a podcast just around what the Seahawks are up to, what's going on in the NFL. I'm a Bills fan, so it's been about, I guess they got in the playoffs. Kind of lucked out. It was a lot of fun that they got in the playoffs, but similar type of fan bases as far as just the rabid fan and just want what's best for the team and what's best for the city. And so no doubt the Seahawks, I think, are a team you always have to keep an eye on right now. But you applied so many different things to that conversation as well, not only talking about the players and where they're going and where they've been, but also how it applies to business and culture. And there's so many tie-ins there. I mean, you could write articles just talking about how the Seahawks and how they built their culture and not being too big for your business or too big for your team, right? And there's so many different angles to look at there, and just makes you think, right? It makes you think of what you're doing in your business. And then clearly that's what you're doing. That's what you have going on. You have a great mind when it comes to thinking about sports and business and just watching it all and having fun with it. I mean, that's the one thing that I see is you have a passion for what you're doing. You have a passion no matter whether it's what you're doing right now on the podcast or in your business or being a fan of the Seattle Seahawks. So it's a lot of fun to talk to people like yourself, and look forward to staying in touch a lot more with that. I want to end with one final question and then let you get out of here. But the question is, when was the one moment, and I'm sure there's, there's been many moments out there, but when was the one moment you told yourself you need to make it happen and you gave yourself no excuses?
Every morning when I wake up, every single morning, no doubt. It's an everyday thing. You cannot ever, at least for me, it's just, I think, you always, for me at least, I have to always remind myself every day, that it's a new day. Yesterday could have been bad, could have been good. It's still a new day. It can be bad or good today. You don't know, but you always have to continue to put your best foot forward. If I were to pick one, I'd go back 5 years when I separated from my last employer and went out on my own to do what I'm doing now. And it was, it was a coffee meeting with the boss, and we had a good talk. We had a good chat about the state of the business, what we were doing, where it was going, and whatnot. And we were both on the same page in terms of okay, business going one direction, I'm probably going in another direction. And I had in my mind, even way longer than that, of doing my own thing, and left that meeting and got in the car. I don't even think the engine had turned on before I'm on the phone with a friend of mine, an old coworker, an old colleague, who had been on his own for about a year or two. And I just said, let's go. I'm like, here we go. And that was it. I just right then and there, I'm like, you don't know when it's going to happen, how it's going to happen. I had kind of been putting the wheels in motion as far as the thought process and some early planning. But once that finality happened, then it was like, there we go. And so there was that one moment right there, and I always remember vividly. There wasn't a doubt, a hesitation, or anything in my mind. And knowing that, though, in doing so, I had to deliver. I look up on my office wall. I have my picture of my son, picture of my daughter, picture of my wife, picture of my family. Every day. Just look at those. It's for them. And so there's just, you look at that. I look at it that way, and that drives me. Yeah.
Well, good for you. And it's a good story. Similar stuff on my side, same type of thing where you realize that it's his time. It's time to go out, and it's time to do what you've always wanted to do. When it's not working somewhere else, you just make it happen. And you, like you said, you gave yourself no excuses, and you continue to do that every day and look at your family and understand what you're doing it all for, and a lot of different good things that you have going on. So appreciate you sharing that with us. Appreciate you spending time with us and being on our podcast. I think it's really cool. People say Twitter doesn't work, or LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram, any of these different platforms. No doubt you got to still talk to people and build a relationship and meet people and talk, all that kind of stuff. But these are different platforms that there's no possible way that we talk or meet if it's not for Twitter. So I would encourage people, not saying Twitter is the place to go, but there's just a lot of different places you can go to meet new people. And it doesn't have to do anything besides having a great conversation like I think we just had. And I appreciate you, like I said before, spending some time with us. Gino, what is the best way people can get in touch with you?
Best way to get in touch with me, my LinkedIn is my home from a business standpoint. Just look me up, Gino Trapani, and I'm out in Seattle. You can find my LinkedIn page. Company website, TrapaniAssociates.com. With a caveat, I created that website 5 years ago, and I literally hadn't looked at it for 4 years. So I got I'm in the midst of redesign and whatnot, so it's a little old. There's some old content on there, but anyways, that's my that's my website landing page. But yeah, I mean, LinkedIn from a professional standpoint is where you're going to find me socially. So
absolutely, and soon to be on SportsEpreneur. We'll put some of your great articles that you've written and that you will be writing on there, and people can find you that way. And obviously, listen to this podcast. So Gino, really again appreciate you spending the time sharing your stories with us, and we'll definitely be staying in touch.
Absolutely, and you know what? I'm a closet Bills fan myself. Just to let you know, I shout out to my cousin Jeffrey. My cousin Jeffrey out on Long Island. He's a huge Bills fan, and so every football season, him and I are just trading back and forth. And so just through him, and I love the underdog, man. Like I can't imagine the pain in the early '90s of 4 straight and not winning one. I don't know how I'd handle that one. But I'm a huge fan of the underdog, and I always love to see those kind of teams, pull out and get some success. So I'm a Bills backer as well.
There we go. Yeah, the Bills have quite a history, and it's been tough. And when you lose as much as they've lost, they tend to bring on more fans. It's like the Patriots who continue to win, or the Golden State Warriors. They're the ones that attract the haters, and sometimes for good reason, right? But as being a Bills fan, we know. But yeah, the Bills they're a fun team, but they are frustrating, and but always good to meet football fans and Bills fans alike. And your cousin's obviously doing well by himself by not rooting for the Jets or the Giants and choosing the Bills to root over those New York related teams, right?
Right.
So anyway, well, Gino, thanks again for joining us, and we will talk to you soon.
Good stuff, Eric, man. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Gino, it was absolutely awesome having you on this podcast. From your knowledge in the recruiting world to your relationship building skills, we know all entrepreneurs can learn from you. The perspectives from Gino on his journey of building his own business and helping other businesses grow are now perspectives you as a business owner and entrepreneur can use for yourself. And for that, Gino, thank you. And for anyone looking to talk to Gino about his story or to learn more about his recruiting business, we encourage you to reach out to him. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to me directly. You can find me on LinkedIn or contact me on Twitter and Instagram at Eric_Kaz. Thank you for listening to our KazSource podcast, Entrepreneur Perspectives, building and protecting your business one podcast at a time. Until next time, we're out of here. This podcast exists in large part because of KazCM, the content marketing business inside KazSource Inc. KazCM is excited to bring the content marketing services used at KazSource to you. Learn more by visiting KazCM.com. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. It's a big deal to us. We hope you found value in it, and if you did, we would be incredibly grateful if you gave us a review on iTunes. Remember to subscribe to this podcast and feel free to share it with anyone you know. More than anything, thank you again for listening. We appreciate it.